the first round of the NBA draft has officially wrapped up, and I just wanted to go over some of my notes, some of the reaches that happened in this year's NBA draft, overall, the futures of a lot of these teams with these new picks, these new players, and some potential second round, drafts, guys who fell in the second round, guys who could get drafted. And we're just going to get started immediately. I think when I look at the first two draft picks, it went accordingly as planned. We look at Cooper Flag. I made a video earlier on Cooper Flag, my last two videos ago, and how I don't really see Cooper Flag as a generational prospect. However, he brings a lot of value as one of the best two-way players in recent memories to come out of the draft. And, he's one of the best Duke players in history. I still wouldn't consider him a better freshman than Zion, but I think his impact, especially learning behind, three championship caliber players and veterans, it adds a lot to his motor, and it could really help him. No surprise there. I think it's a great fit. I think it works well. He's gonna do a lot for the city of Maine as well. Dylan Harper is a interesting case because obviously now you have guys like you have De'Aaron Fox there, and then Stephon Castle won Rookie of the Year. So what does that look like? Granted, you also have other guards that aren't bad themselves, like a Devin Vassell. Even though he's not a point guard, it's a pretty good guard. And where does that leave Dylan Harper? I think this, regardless, was the right move. I think you draft best player available. I know the fit is an important thing, especially when I think the Spurs are ready to make that jump and that leap to higher levels to potentially contention. But when you don't have a clear cut number three or a wing in this draft that you're most confident in, I think you take the best player available regardless of fit. And I think Dylan Harper is that. I'm very high on Dylan Harper. He's very James Harden, Kate Cunningham-esque to me. I think the way he gets to his basket, the way he scores, the way he finishes, I think it's very elite. And, do I think he's going to be Rookie of the Year? Do I think he's going to be good in his first year in San Antonio? It's hard to say. I probably wouldn't bet on it just because of the logjam in the backcourt. So, yeah, I wouldn't bet on it, but I think it was the right move. I think the Spurs got a very good, touted, taller point guard. And one thing I have noticed in this draft, a lot of taller point guards are starting to get drafted more. So I think the top two picks don't come as a surprise. And then the third pick is the Philadelphia 76ers select VJ Edgecombe. I think there was a lot of divide with this pick, especially because so late last minute there were reports saying last week that Ace Bailey could fall to a 6 or 8. You know, somebody who is, he measured with 6'7" without shoes, but realistically he's still probably around like 6'8", maybe 6'9". I think that 6'10" did him a little bit dirty. It helped him until he got to the draft, but I do think VJ for the 76ers provides a lot of value in terms of being that defensive upside shooting guard. He measured in at like 6'5", 190, and during the combine he shot well, and during the season, towards the end of the season, he shot really well, and I think on catch and shoot he shot over 40%. And him being really athletic, he has a different mold to his game where it's, as the third overall pick, usually you want to draft guys who have the insane upside, the guys that will be the superstars in the league. But I think with Daryl Morey's cases, they're also drafting for a guy who can win now. And I think when it comes to Ace Bailey, obviously he canceled his workout with them, so you don't really want a player that doesn't want to play for your city. As much as how good they are, I know they did the same thing with Charles Barkley, but as much as how good Ace Bailey might be, it's a gamble to take somebody who won't want to be there because they've already experienced something like that with Ben Simmons. Now, BJ is like I said, he's an interesting case because you do have another logjam, like similar to the Spurs, with Grimes playing extremely well. I think averaging over 20 points per game for the Sixers towards the later half of the season. And then you have Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain come back for injury. So where does that leave VJ Edgecombe? It could be a lot of different cases. I don't think he's going to make an insane scoring impact to first start off, especially if Joel Embiid and Paul George are healthy. I think him being in the guard position, he's going to make a lot of impact winning plays, and I think that's how the Sixers are going to use him. He's probably not going to average 15 to 16 points per game off the bench. Realistically, if Jared McCain comes back healthy and then Grimes is maybe starting, depending on who they get in free agency, I just don't see it. I see VJ as a win now type of player for the Sixers, and maybe they regret it without not taking Ace Bailey, but it does help the Sixers right now because you don't have to rely on somebody like Ace Bailey, who's very good, but has a lot of the intangibles of being, taking a lot of difficult shots, not being able to do a lot of different things on the court besides scoring. So I think it could benefit the Sixers, and I do think it was the right pick. As for the fourth pick in this year's NBA draft, Con Knipple, um, late I did see that Con Knipple was starting to rise. He was projected to go a little bit in the later half in the lottery, but then he started to really rise, especially in the ACC tournament when Cooper Flag went down. He really showed out. And I think it's no surprise that he did go to Charlotte. I think Charlotte has a history of not really drafting the best characters. I don't really want to put it in that type of light because at the end of the day, it is a young team, but they need to have connector pieces, and I think drafting a sharpshooter who is more than just a shooter is very important. He hustles, he gets on the floor. He might not be the best defender, but he's a glue guy, and you don't really want to draft that with the fourth overall pick. So I can see the arguments of maybe not selecting an Ace Bailey or somebody with better upside, but I do think it helps. Unironically, I think in later in this draft, they select Liam McNeely, so they're getting sharpshooters, and I like that. I'm actually high on Liam McNeely, but I'll get to that later. I think Khan is very Desmond Bain esque. He provides a lot of shooting, but scoring in the mid range and attacking the basket. He's a bigger body, so I like that for Charlotte. But it's not the most flashy pick, but I do think I agree with it, and I can see the vision. It's not a horrible pick. As to there's a few picks in the draft that are insane reaches that we'll get to, but Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey drops from projected 3 to 5, which is not an insane drop, but it is a drop. There's been a lot of hate and divide with this Ace Bailey conundrum with a lot of people in his camp, especially because Sharif, Sharif Cooper's dad is his agent, and there's a lot of rumors going around of him canceling workouts and not being able to provide a sustainable meetings with a lot of teams, and it dropped his draft stock. And that is risky. I don't think you want to play with that, especially too often if you're not the clear cut number one player in this class. But it has been done before, especially in other sports, and it has worked out. Ace Bailey, in my eyes, is a player who it's a weird mix because similar to VJ Edgecombe, they have a very wide range in terms of potential and downfall. Because a VJ Edgecombe, worst case scenario, he's a Dennis Smith Jr., and then best case scenario, he's a prime Victor Oladipo s type of player, right? And then Ace Bailey, if I'm being honest, I don't like the Kevin Durant comparisons. I don't really see him as Kevin Durant. I think Kevin Durant at Texas, him being 7 foot and averaging 20 to 25 points per game in the SEC is completely different metric, and we have to take that into account because I think a realistic comparison is a more advanced Brandon Ingram. I don't think that's too harsh to say, but then his worst case scenario could be a taller version of a shot chucker, a taller version of Jordan Clarkson, right? But Utah picking him in terms of his on his personal level and his front office, his camp, they didn't really want to go to Utah, but I think regardless, him being there still gets him what he wants in terms of him being able to be a top option on that team. Granted, they drafted other guys like Cody Williams in the year prior, and then they still have Taylor Hendricks coming in, so they have some wing issues here and there, but I think he will have the keys. And in terms of Utah, I think they're running into. I feel like they're in that weird position where they're just drafting anybody, and that's not to say with Ace Bailey, but I mean in terms of direction. Now, granted, I trust Danny Ainge because he fleeces everybody, right? It's so hard to trade with Danny Ainge, and he's like that, if I'm being honest, right? So maybe it is the right pick, and maybe the picks like Taylor Hendricks and Cody Williams work out well. But I don't really have any issues with this. That they take the swing on the high upside guy. I think Utah will have a lot of fun, sell out a lot of tickets, especially with Ace Bailey being there. Who knows if marketing will be there in the future or if Kessler is traded to the Lakers. Next up we have Trey Johnson. I'm not gonna go through every single pick. I'll go to the most, you know, guys who are coveted, and then some surprise picks here and there that I'll stay longer with. But I don't. I think Trey Johnson, unironically, when you trade Jordan Poole to the Pelicans, right, and then you get a player like Trey Johnson, I wouldn't say they're similar in terms of play style, but in terms of how they elevate themselves on a game to game basis with how they choose their shots, right? So they're very good shot makers, and I think you could argue that Trey Johnson might be the best shot creation and shot player in this class, right? Averaging around 20 points per game in the SEC for Texas, and he done it pretty efficiently. But I think it just adds more value with needing more consistent shooting. You have a big veteran presence with um, CJ McCollum, and then you have Chris Middleton. I'm pretty sure Marcus Smart is still there, but you have guys like that, and then you have the young guys that are doing well, like Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, Bob Carrington. I think Trey Johnson goes to a system where he can learn from a lot of guys who have won, and he doesn't have to always take these chucked up shots. He has a decent point guard in Bob Carrington there. He has a decent. I think the Wizards are assembling something decent, and I like the Trey Johnson pick. Jeremiah Fears, I have nothing bad to say about this. It's a good pick. I like it. I do think if Jeremiah Fears was available, the Nets would take Jeremiah Fears over Jaeger Deming, but I think it's the right pick. I think they get a nice guard that is pretty flashy, 6'3" point guard from Oklahoma, and I think it works well. They've always been linked to a point guard, especially because I don't think DeJounte Murray is there long term. Now, I would say the first reach in this NBA draft, I thought this would be the biggest reach, but apparently it's not. But Jaeger Demon goes 8 to Brooklyn. So for context, sorry, my nose is running. For context, Jaeger Demon originally earlier in the season was like a projected top 5 pick. He was averaging like 15 points per game and maybe like 6 assists if I can remember for BYU. But granted, these were against like bottom 100 teams, right? Maybe that's an over exaggeration, but bottom 100 teams, he was doing really well. And then as the season started to progress, he started playing pretty poorly. He struggled to score the ball like a lot, and he turned the ball over a lot. So him going 8 is kind of weird because I was originally high on Jaeger, but then when you watch him play against really coveted and highly recruited talent, especially with good overall defensive teams, he struggled a lot. He just cannot hit a shot to save his life. And I think in the last like 30 games he played, he could barely shoot. He could barely shoot over 30% from three. He struggled making layups and getting to the basket. He drives in a straight line, is what I'm saying. He's very tunnel vision esque in terms of attacking. I do think it is a reach. Honestly, the Brooklyn Nets had a weird lineup of players. I think individually the players that they drafted are fine, but as a whole, they drafted weird. Like they drafted like 3 point guards, overseas taller point guards, basically, and then a shooting guard and a big man. That's basically a point guard. So the Nets. I don't really know what the Nets are doing. I think they're just getting as much guys as they want, right? But it is a reach. I don't see Jaeger being that good in terms of offensively scoring. Like Josh Giddey was arguably a reach. I think he went like top 8 and he was projected to go like 11 through 14, and it worked out. But granted, Josh Giddey, he was playing against grown men and he was doing pretty decently. BYU is a good system, but I do think this is a reach, and they could have gone a better prospect to help them out a little bit more long term. Um, Toronto takes CMB. I have nothing really much to say. It fits their type of mode. I thought they were gonna take like a Carter Bryant type of player. That I thought that fit them, but CMB is good. I think he provides a lot of value. Apparently, he didn't want to go there. I saw the draft video. That was crazy. But I think he provides a lot of value. There is gonna be a weird shooting aspect because besides like Grady Dick and maybe Jacoby Walters, the shooting, especially because CMB can't really shoot, is going to be a little bit difficult for the Raptors to manage. But I think him coming off the bench and learning will be fine. It's not that big of a deal. One of the bigger trades, Houston. Obviously, they got Kevin Durant, and then Phoenix takes Kaman Maluach. I'm not as high on Kaman, and then weirdly, before they selected the pick, I look on my phone, and they trade for Mark Williams. And don't get me wrong, I think Nick Richards is fine. I think overall he's a backup. Mark Williams has the potential to be really good, and then they take Kaman. They address the big situation with 2 other bigs, which I would rather them, if they were going to trade for Mark Williams, I would rather them take a wing, a high upside wing, with I think only Ryan Dunn really consistently being there, and even then he's not the best. In terms of the actual pick, come on, I'm not as high on him as I feel like other people are. It's very high upside, very raw potential. Um, I don't like usually like the physicality traits are good, but like I don't see that like there needs to be a skill based aspect, especially with the NBA. I might make that for an off the glass video where I talk about the skill based versus physical based aspect of the NBA. But yeah, I think he struggled a lot. He didn't score a lot, and he doesn't have different ways to score. He's mainly just a catch dunk type of guy. You know, a lob threat. You know, defensively, I don't think he's as good as projected. I think he played against a really top heavy perimeter defensive oriented team with Duke. But yeah, I'm not super high on Kaman. I do think it was the right pick. However, because I mean, it's Phoenix, right? I do think he will struggle a little bit. He might look a little lost, in my opinion, because they don't have a true point guard to really give him the ball. But I don't think it's the worst pick. I think in terms of the next few picks, I like Cedric Howard to Memphis. I think that was an absolute steal. Cedric Howard played D3, and then he was originally committed to Duke, and then he had an amazing few games for Washington State, I'm pretty sure. You could argue it's also high swing because he only played a few games, right? But I think his size and his athleticism, him being like 6'6" to 6'8", it provides definitely defensive oriented philosophy for Memphis, and I like that. Noah Senge, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not high on Noah Senge. I think I don't really like when evaluating players, you see them and then their main thing is that they're physical and their measurements, and I think that's cool. I guess it works out, but it really the skill is what I'm really feeding for, and I think that's very important. And while he has better defensive upside and that could hope, I think when you draft a player like Mates Buzelis last year, like the Chicago Bulls have this weird thing of just drafting wings who are very inconsistent offensively. And you know, you maybe have a hit with Mates, so I don't know why you don't draft maybe a Derek Queen if you want to trade a Vucevic or anything else like that. But that's I would say that's what I say for the Bulls. It is what it is. Interesting trade for the Hawks as they trade for New Orleans. I think they moved 10 spots back, and New Orleans gets Derek Queen. Derek Queen is an interesting prospect to me because he could either be really really good, Domantas Sabonis type of player, maybe an Alperen Sengun, or he could just flat out flatline and he's just and he's pretty bad. I think his game is weird because he's looked at as somebody who has shooting potential, but it's not really there, right? And you know he has the ability to put the ball on the floor and work in the half court, which is very rare for somebody who's 6'11", like 250, right? But if the Pelicans don't trade Zion, I think that doesn't work in terms of fit, and one of them has to come off the bench. I'm assuming Derek Queen because I don't think he's a traditional center or a big man, right? He's labeled as a center, but he plays more like a four, sometimes even a three. So that would be an interesting case, and I might look at that in another video, but I really don't see it working out, right? I love Carter Bryant to the Spurs and Thomas Sorber to OKC. I think these two picks work best with what their team needs, right? I think the Spurs value a lot of guys who are very athletic but can play a role, right? And I think not Thomas Bryant, Carter Bryant is perfect for that. I think Carter Bryant provides a lot of value in being, even though he only averaged like 6 points per game for Arizona, when you watch him play, it's very consistent in terms of he had a role. He was a D3 and D prospect. He was very athletic. He got on the rim. He's like an Opie Toppin, like a shorter version of Opie Toppin, like right now, if that makes sense. Or maybe like a less polished John Collins, because John Collins has played really well this season, right? But I like that fit. It's not really a project. I think you can play Carter Bryant right now. You can learn behind like a Harrison Barnes, or especially if they want him in that type of role when Harrison Barnes eventually departures. Thomas Sorber, I think arguably the second best big man in this class. You could argue that. He's very underrated in my eyes. Granted, he didn't play amazing competition, but he played really well. He has that passing pedigree where he can really play make, which is very um, sought after, especially in the draft. And I think him being his size, very athletic, very Onyeka Okongwu esque, and I like that especially for OKC because one of the biggest issues, especially with Chet Holmgren out there, is that because they love to run that small ball five, they lose a lot of rebounding out there, which is why they needed Isaiah Hartenstein and they signed Isaiah Hartenstein. But you get a guy like Thomas Sorber, I think it's great, and I'm pretty sure they did. I'm pretty sure they did because I'm looking at my notes. I want to talk about the biggest reach in this year's NBA first round draft. It is without a doubt, no hesitation. It is the 16th pick, Hanson Yang, going to the Portland Trailblazers after the Memphis Grizzlies traded that pick. I'm not high on Hanson Yang like at all. It's weird because I get to see somebody of like I'm not Chinese, but I get to see somebody of my heritage get drafted, and it's cool I guess, but like, and I like it. It means a lot that representation, but at the same time, it's like as a player, I'm not high on him. I don't think his type of play style really pans out unless it's an extreme, right? So, like you could argue, people say Baby Jokic, but like you could argue like if he plays very similar to like a Sengun, right? That offense has to be there because although Sengun isn't the best defender, he has the athletic ability to attack the basket, shoot the three consistently, and he played in Turkey. Hanson, although he had a good combine, right, and he played well, and he showed out in the combine, and he looked completely fine against other like prospects in the draft, which raised his draft stock a lot. But like Tankathon had him like 42, and I think the highest I ever saw him was 35. This is arguably like 20 plus picks higher than projection, and it just it doesn't make sense for Portland to take a player like Hanson Yang because you have a Donovan Clicking, you have a Robert Williams, and you have a DeAndre Ayton. Now, granted, I think DeAndre Ayton and Robert Williams aren't probably going to be there, but I don't understand the value with this because one, I Donovan Clicking coming into the draft was an older prospect, right? And he out of UConn, he's great. I think he is the future of their team. And maybe if he's not the best center, maybe Portland trades for a better center. He's always going to be a really good backup, especially him being like 7 foot, 250, and not 250, like 280, and an insane shot blocker and rebounder. And that's needed in the current today NBA. I'm not high on Hanson because even though he was the defensive player of the year in the CBA, he's very slow laterally. I genuinely feel like he would be a very slow NBA player. And in the half court, he probably works fine. But as a big man, unless you are like top, highly recruited, or even if you're not highly recruited, unless you're an extreme at something like Jokic was selected in the second round, but his passing was always on an extreme level, which is the why they utilize that. Hanson is not on an extreme on any like he's an above average passer for sure at his size, but it doesn't like elevate his team in terms of okay, when you look at Hanson, all right, he that is something where it stands out and it could be something that's super dominant, but it's not, right? So I'm not high on him. I don't think I'm gonna be real. I don't think he's gonna be a good defender in the NBA. He definitely will have some upside in him being a very good post move player, right? A post work. He has amazing footwork. He's a lot more athletic than people give him. Not like athletic in terms of like defensively because he shuffles his feet, right? But I think how he moves is okay. But 16 is insane. It's the biggest reach. I think this is more of a business move. But honestly, I don't think any of these first round teams were selecting Hanson Yang. Like I think none of these. You could definitely got him in the second round, but it is the biggest reach in my eyes. Insane. I think Joan Barrett. I can't pronounce his name from France Center to Minnesota. I think it's a good pick. I think you get value, especially if you lose Naz Reid, because I think Minnesota is trying to shed off money as being a second apron team. Maybe I think they're definitely going to lose Nikhil Alexander Walker if they want to bring money for more for Naz Reid. But you just in case you have another backup option, I think that's completely fine. You take a swing. I like what Washington's doing. Washington. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes real quick. Um, I like what Washington's doing. They're getting more upside shooting. They take a little bit of an over prospect in Walter Clayton Jr., who did really well for Florida. I think he's from Iona, but he showed out, especially this year and in the draft combine. And I think you take a guy that has the potential to be a great shooter, and you draft. Sorry, I'm completely sorry. I'm looking at this right now. I'm pretty sure he got traded to Utah. Either way, let me just fact check everything. I'm so sorry. Walter Um, but regardless, getting drafted to Utah also provides a lot of shooting, right? Yes, he's. I'm apologize, but he's drafted to Utah, and that also provides a lot of shooting because they get Ace Bailey, right? They want to provide more shooting for the team overall, and I think that's a completely fine pick. I think you get a value at 18 is great. I'm not really gonna talk about the Nets picks because, quite frankly, it was a really weird draft. Nolan Traore, I'm not really high on. He struggled a lot. He was originally projected to go top five very early on in the season, but he struggled. He's a bigger guard, like similar to Jaeger Demon in terms of like very good playmaking guards that are bigger. I think the biggest surprise and the biggest fall is Kasparis Yakuchonas. I'm actually pretty high on him as more of a two guard than a one. I think Miami gets great value with him at pick 20, and I love that pick for Miami because in my eyes, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I see him very as a normal Norman Powell type of player, right? Do I think he's gonna be like that? Who knows? But I'm high on him in terms of being a two guard and not a one. I like what he can provide as a two. I don't like him being a playmaker. He turns the ball over a lot. Like his assisted turnover ratio is not good, especially against good competition. He struggled a lot. But I think what he can provide you as a just strictly scoring guard, a bigger body, especially being like 6'6", is great. And I think that's good value for Miami, especially in the second round, because you have somebody to rely on if Tyler Hero is not there. Some defensive lapses for sure, but overall, it's fine. I think the next few picks, Will Riley and Drake Powell. I think Will Riley, he's traded to Washington. Great value. Another shooter added to Washington. Veteran experience where he can learn from Chris Middleton. I think it's fine completely. He's what like 6'7", not 6'7", 6'8" from Illinois. He played with Yakuchono, so they go back to back Illinois boys, right? But yeah, I think that's a pretty good spot for him. Drake Powell, pretty good from UNC. I like him. He went to Brooklyn. He got traded from Atlanta. I'm pretty sure it was the pick, but I think it's a fine pick overall. And originally the next pick, Asa Nua going to Atlanta. It's weird because Asa. Well, I mean Asa's. He went to Georgia, right? So he's right around the corner. But the pick is it's a very high projection upside pick because Asa. Originally, I thought he was going to be really good. I thought he was a very good bruiser back guy that could get to the rim. Opie Toppin without the shooting upside. That's what I thought originally earlier in the season, but he struggled a lot in terms of just being in the right places at the right time, scoring on different levels, just playing a role. Granted, Georgia maybe wasn't the best. They were okay, but um, yeah, I think this is just high projection upside. Somebody behind Jalen Johnson if he's not healthy. I think you get an absolute steal with Nick Clifford going to Sacramento. Respect older players. That's what I'm going to say. I know guys like Hami Hakes got drafted last year or 2 years ago, and they weren't the best, but respect these older players, and I think Nick Clifford will be a very great, amazing value player for Sacramento. What he can provide is like a 6'6", 6'7" wing that can do everything on the court. I think it's great. Those type of players are very hard to find, and that's what's the modern day NBA, and I love that. I think that's great value. Jace Richardson falls, but he falls to a really good team. From Denver, he gets from the Denver pick. It's Orlando selected him. I think because you lose Cole Anthony, now you get a different prospect in Jace Richardson, who's more offensive scoring upside. I think it's a fine pick. I was surprised because honestly, I thought Jace Richardson was gonna go maybe late lottery or like a little bit outside the lottery, but he goes 25. Weird picks with Ben Serif and Danny Wolf, basically two point guards, right? Two bigger point guards. I know Danny Wolf's like 7 foot, but it's I don't really know where the Nets is going. I think the Nets are just trying to lose. They're just getting any player. You're getting a lot of international players. I feel like they're just trying to bridge a bigger market as well, right? But I think Ben Serif played well. He's like a 6'5", 1-2 guard. And, I think they're both from Israel, Danny Wolf and Ben Serif. But, yeah, I think both of them play pretty fine, and they can work off each other. I'm excited to see what Danny Wolf can be into, especially because he's really athletic for somebody being 7 foot, and he can move like a point guard. A lot of guys from Michigan can do that. The Franz better. But Yeah, I like that pick. Celtics take huge upside swing in Hugo Gonzalez, also a guy that originally and earlier in the season for Real Madrid. He was projected to go really highly, potentially lottery, and he kind of just subsided and he flatlined a little bit. He just wasn't that good, and his stats weren't that good. But they're taking a swing in someone who's very athletic and that can play a role. I like Liam McNeely. Liam McNeely was traded to Charlotte. I know I talked about him a little bit earlier with the Charlottes and Concanible pick, but I think what UConn was doing because what is his name? Aiden Mahaney. I completely butchered that name. But getting him from like St. Mary's and then him not playing well as in a new division, especially a top division, they tried to make Liam McNeely run the point guard role, and that's just not his role. I think his shooting upside is great. I think what he provides as a movement shooter, especially him also being able to get to the basket, and he's very athletic too. I like that, especially for a team like Charlotte. They get another connected piece, another shooter. It works. I think LaMelo, if he stays healthy, you have two shooters, elite shooters on your team, and I think it works. Clippers take a upside swing in Yannick Conan. He did well in the combine. I'm not sure if he did super well at Penn State, but I know he did a lot well with the combine, and he was battling out with Hanson Yang. So I think that's a complete fine pick. You get somebody to maybe like third string backup, Zubac, or second string potentially, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So those are my first round opinions. In terms of guys that I like in the second round, because I wanted to go over that, I think best available without a doubt Rasheer Fleming or a dude Darrow from Arkansas. I think these guys, as mentioned before, with modern day wings in the NBA, guys who are between 6'6" to 6'9", you see the Jalen Williams archetype, the OG Ananobis, the Mikal Bridges. These are the guys that get paid the big money because they can play a role. They can play elite defense, and if you need them to hit shots, they can hit shots. And and they have the size for it, right? They're athletic. Fleming is an interesting prospect in terms of him being 6'9" with like a 7'5" wingspan. He's a junior, but he's playing at a not so great competition at St. Joe's, right? St. Joe's. And he tends to struggle with finding different types of shots and working in the half court, where he's a lot of catch and shoot and drive in a straight line type of player. But I like his upside. Very similar to Adu Thero. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. Guys who are that type of mode get paid a lot, and I think those guys, without a doubt, should get drafted very early on. To wrap it up, we have guys like Maxine, I cannot pronounce his name, and Noah Penda as big men that would probably do well. Kalkbrenner, I forgot about him. And then Johnny Brumi, I think he will go well. There's a potential that the entire Duke starting lineup could get drafted from Tyrese Proctor, originally a top projected lottery pick a few years ago, and then he decided to stay at Duke. Sion James, very Lou Dort-esque, 6'5", bigger bruiser back that can play elite defense. Kobe Barea, elite sharpshooter. Dink Paint, wow. I haven't seen that name in a while, but Dink Paint was originally with the G League Ignite, and then obviously that shut down. And he was projected to be like one of those Scoot Henderson type of players where they took a 2-year program, even though you're supposed to do one at G League, basically reclassified, and then he didn't play that well with Mexico City in the G League. But yeah, Cam Jones is a big name as well. Some prospects from Australia as well, but I think those are the main guys. And I'm excited for the second round. I mainly wanted just to do the first round, just quite frankly, I'm more in tune with the first round of the NBA draft. Overall, nothing too big surprises besides mainly two, and the main one was Hanson Yang and then Jaeger Demon, but Hanson Yang was insane. I don't think he's probably like, me personally, I'm pretty low on him, but I know a lot of people had him between 35 to 40, but yeah, I think nothing too crazy. You had some draft trades here and there, besides like Mark Williams being moved to the Suns, nothing super big. I'm recording this right now, like right after the draft, so I have no idea if there's a trade going on. In fact, I'll probably just check right now if there is a trade, because I'm right here. But if there's no trade, then yeah, I'm not seeing any big trades. Um, Nope. First round was wrapped up. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'm sorry I couldn't get the championship video. I had notes for the Game 7, and then I also had notes for the CJ McCollum trade and other trades that recently happened. I forgot, but my computer completely shut down. But thank you guys so much. My name's Cairo. Hopefully I can get more videos out, and thank you. Please subscribe to the channel.